My name is Ben. I'm the youth pastor here at Sutton Vineyard. It is such a pleasure to be with you all. And I love this story that we're going to look at this morning. I'm so excited. And it's been a huge blessing for me just looking into it a little bit more. And so I'm absolutely thrilled just to chat you through some of what I've looked at, some of my thoughts. And hopefully it can be of worth this morning. But if Sally can come up and bring us the Bible passage, then we'll pray, and then we'll get cracking on. Thank you very much.
Mark chapter 5, verses 1 to 20. They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied. "For we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Sally. All right, let's just pray, and then we will crack on. Father God, I thank you for all that you reveal through your words. I pray that as we look at this story today, that we will catch a fresh glimpse of who you are, and we will just grow closer to you through that. Amen. All right, so the theme for the last few weeks and for the next few is unqualified, and so this morning we're looking at Legion, and this is genuinely my favorite of all the personal miracles that Jesus does. I think it's incredible, and hopefully you will agree with me by the end. But this is a little bit of a roadmap for where we're going. So we're going to start off looking at the Decapolis, what that was, how it was important in itself. Then we're going to look at Legion, where he found himself before, kind of a context for this story. Then we're going to look at the miracle itself, get to the action, look at the impact, and then we're going to look at the power of a story and how kind of none of us here are any less qualified than he was. Does that sound okay? You coming with me on this? I mean, the enthusiasm this morning is incredible. You lot need to calm down, if anything. Oh, okay. So to start with, we need to set the scene. So Jesus and his disciples crossed over to the other side. And this is more than just like kind of a geographical insight of where they're going. It literally was like stepping into enemy territory. And the other side was just kind of revealed the division between the societies rather than just the grounds they were on. And the Gerasenes that they went to was part of the Decapolis, which was a collection of 10 Greco-Roman cities. And some people think that these were the dispersed people from when Joshua took the Israelites into the Promised Land in like Joshua 6, old school Bible. They were not on good terms. It was not kind of a friendly, oh yeah, no, we'll go over there. It's a nice difference. This was as different as it got. The Decapolis was filled with pagan temples featuring terrible violence, sexual exploitation, and greed. And they worshipped the most unclean animal in Israel, the pig. It was regarded as sacred and used as worship on that other side. So as they were going there, it would have been a real massive thing. This was the center of Roman power, filled with legions of soldiers. We'll come back to that a little bit in a minute. But Jesus saying, let's go over to the other side, would have been challenging everything the disciples thought they knew about him and his mission. He was challenging the view that they didn't matter. They lived a certain way, and so we shouldn't be bothered with. It's probably best to steer clear of them. His words and actions showed that this was not his view at all. A theme we'll again look at in a minute. So that's the Decapolis, and now we come to Legion. What do we know about him before all of this happens, before it all kind of kicks off? So he comes out of the tombs to meet him. He lived in the tombs. This is so symbolic of his existence. He may have been alive, but he wasn't truly living. He was among the dead. This wasn't a place for him to kind of find joy. It was completely out of society. It was where no one really wanted to go ever. No one was able to restrain him anymore, even with chains. So at some point, it suggests that he was restrained with chains, chained down, unable to move or do anything to anyone else or himself. But at a certain point, even that stopped being able to work, as awful as that was. And then always, night and day, he was crying out among the tombs and in the mountains and cutting himself with stones. Night and day. It wasn't just during bad periods or dark times, but this was constant. He was completely overtaken, powerless to fight against it. He is hopeless. He sees no future. He can't take the torment he is experiencing. He's screaming out in anguish. And I don't know if you can really imagine that mix of pain and suffering, the inner turmoil. It's not just a tears or kind of a sobbing, but it was more of a, ah! Like literally that pained. It was all of that going into it. It was horrendous. And this is what the people would have heard night and day, far off in that place that you don't want to go to. That kind of inner turmoil. Now, if I can be a little bit honest and vulnerable with you this morning, I had a realization while I was looking into this. He was possessed by demons and tormented constantly. And as I was preparing, I suddenly realized that if I were one of the disciples, I'd have blamed the Decapolis entirely. You see, this is what happens when you behave like they do. And straight away, I slipped into the mindset of judgment and division. And that's exactly what Christ came to break. But even just looking within that division for a little minute, I realized that I fall into it. Anyway, that was just a little bit of honesty that I thought I'd share. So back to Legion. This man had lost everything. His home, his family, free will, his peace, the very society that he grew up in. Friendships, basic human interaction. Life at a very basic level had been stripped from him. And we read in John 10:10, Jesus talking, and he says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But I, Jesus, have come that you may have life and have it to the full." A little bit of a spoiler within that. If you don't know where this story's going, it's got a really good ending. But at the minute, life is bleak for this man. He can't carry on. He doesn't know where to turn. So we've looked a little bit at the Decapolis. We've seen a little bit of this man's strange and scary existence. And now we get to the really exciting action bit. So Jesus and his disciple cross to the other side. And as soon as Jesus gets off the boat, this crazed and terrifying man comes running at him. And I don't know if I've been watching too much Netflix or the news or whatever, but as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, if that was me and I was watching that, my first thought would have been, he's about to hurt Jesus. He's going to do something like drop kick, some sort of rugby tackle, I don't know. But Jesus needs to be protected. We've got to do something. That shows exactly where I am. Jesus doesn't need protecting. This man runs at him, directly to him. And just when you think it's going to get horrendous, he falls on his knees. And Alan Cole, in his commentary of this passage, says that Jesus is immediately recognized for who he is, because fear as well as love sharpens the eye. And he argues that the demons within Legion recognize the power of the Messiah straight away. And so this is why he finds Legion on his knees immediately. And one question that I want us to think about, because it really changes the way we understand the next few verses. When Jesus talks to this man, is it the man that is responding, or is it the demons themselves? So the man falls to his knees, and Jesus is begged not to torture him. He's already called out the impure spirits. But next, as he does in loads of other stories, he asks the man's name. And this is where it gets really important as to how we answer that question. Because he responds, I am Legion, for we are many. That in itself is like, woof, catch up. Let's really focus on that. So there's two options here. The first is that it's the man. It is this taken man himself. And he's responding as a man who succumbed to all of this reality. His very identity is wrapped up in his name. He is Legion. He's just accepted the way things are now. And he knows that he is controlled and unable to stop this. And while I was thinking about this, I was reminded of Jean Valjean in Les Miserables, where at the start, he is trying to convince Javert that he is called Jean Valjean, and he refers to him as 24601. And throughout his time in prison, 19 years, that is what he is called. And then later on, there's this courtroom scene, and I'm not going to sing, you'll all be very glad to know. But his last words before he flees, who am I? I am 24601. That is part of him then. And for those of you that are massive Lord of the Rings geeks like me, there's a very similar line from Smeagol to Gollum. He's overtaken by the ring, and he can't undo that. It has completely taken him. So that's the first option. The second option is that it's the demons speaking through him. And at that point, we need to realize that the name Legion was powerfully loaded. It was a military term for kind of massive amounts of soldiers, often in their thousands. And what soldiers are trained for constantly? Combat. These are the demons coming at Jesus, trying to intimidate him, trying to scare him a little bit. And what's the effect? Does he recoil in terror? Does he turn around to the disciples that are with him and looking for support? Nah, absolutely nothing. The next thing we read is that Legion goes back to begging. There's no mention of him responding to them at all. This was them trying to scare him, and there's nothing. And in my mind, if we can go to the next picture, I'd imagine Jesus being more animated and his full power trying to be shown physically as he raises his voice and, oh, hold on. Yeah, that's the one. Perfect. Like Gandalf when he's, you shall not pass. That kind of like, yeah, all right, I've got this. This is my full power. And that's not what we see at all. Jesus doesn't need it. He doesn't need to get animated or showy. He has all authority of the creator of the universe, and these demons recognize that. He speaks and they follow his command. He doesn't need to shout. So there were these pigs nearby. In the middle of the story, it seems like, oh, well, that's quite nice. It's a good fact to not know until now. Quite convenient. But in reality, they've been there throughout. And the demons begged Jesus to let them go into these pigs. And this is an incredible bit. And I absolutely love it because it proves so much. They know they're moving on. At this point, we know the man is going to be free. It's about where they go next. It's not about what's going to go on. And Jesus simply gives them permission. He is completely in charge, and they go. 2,000 pigs. I did some Googling for 2,000 pigs. Really hard to get an image of that many pigs. So please imagine this, like multiplied loads, all right? Impossible. But this shows the sheer number, the sheer size of this legion. And I read that the herd would have been a combination of a few smaller herds. And often people think, oh, well, Jesus, like letting the demons go into the pigs and them running over and getting drowned was him ruining someone's life, bankrupting people. Someone's existence has been taken away from them. That's not it at all. It wouldn't have been that someone's life was genuinely ruined by it. But again, it's massively symbolic. These pigs, these worshipped animals within this society, they're not important. They've got no power to resist this. I am the one that is freeing him. It's not these guys. Jesus is the one with the power. So the pigs are incensed, and within the herd, the whole number run into the water and are drowned. The evil spirit's being gone from this place, from this entire region. So the men tending the pigs, funnily enough, they run off to go and tell people that they think need to know. I don't blame them. Something incredible has just happened. And they come and they see Jesus. And they see this man with him, whose name we don't know. I'm going to go with this. It might be an awful joke. I'm going to call him Juan from now on. He was Legion. Never mind. All right, so he's sat and he's in his right mind, all right? And I remember I worked for the council a few years ago, and at one point there was a young person that absolutely lost it as part of an initial meeting with the youth offending team. And I was in the main lounge and I could hear some stuff going on, and then this guy kind of broke out of his room and he started throwing tables and chairs. He broke doors and windows and set off a fire extinguisher. And he was 15 and I was pretty scared of him. I looked in his eyes and there was absolute chaos there. You could see the madness that he'd kind of got to. And a couple of weeks later, we had a meeting with him, and it was some of the restorative justice stuff. And I remember seeing him in the meeting. It was incredible. It was such a stark contrast. He was calm and really ashamed of what he'd done. But at the same time, as we carried on, he was really funny and chatty. He was a really nice guy. But the difference was so obvious. I'd seen the crazed look in his eye on that day, and then seeing him afterwards, straight away, you could see that he wasn't where he was there. He was a different guy. And for these people arriving, this man now acting incredibly differently, they would have known immediately that everything had changed for him. And this next bit is the bit that I struggle with within it all. They see the free man, they hear the story, and they can clearly tell the pigs aren't there anymore. Something truly incredible has occurred. But here's the curveball. They beg Jesus to leave. They don't kneel and worship him and think, wow, what an incredible Savior. They beg him to leave. They have no context for what has happened. And their response is one of fear. I thought before I studied this that they would have been angry and chased him off. And in reality, it's completely different. They're powerless and scared within it. And Jesus doesn't try to reassure them. He simply goes to get in the boat. The people see the power and they chose to reject him. And for some people, that's how it is today. They see Jesus do something and they can't open their heart to that. They can't understand it, and so they reject it. So he gets ready to go. And it's at this point that this man begs Jesus to let him go with him. He's just met the Savior, the Christ. His life has been changed. His whole world has been transformed. He wants to spend more time with him. That makes sense. But Jesus refuses, and he sends him back. However, he isn't sending him back to where he was. He is sending him back to the life that he thought he'd never have again. Back to his family, back to his society, and to those who either haven't heard or don't believe yet that this has even gone on. And after Jesus tells him to go back, and the disciples sail away. This man would have had a moment or a little while. As he walks back to the Decapolis, this is decision time. He could have just gone back to where he had been, hidden away from the people, not told anyone. Just, yeah, I met the living Son of God. He changed my life. I'm going to go and take it nice and easy. We know that this was a pagan society, and so this wouldn't have been an easy thing at all. He could have lived out his days in a cave. His life would have been unbelievably better than it was. He no longer has a legion of demons inside him. He has peace. He has no explanation for what has happened. If people ask questions from his story, he may well have to admit that he doesn't know. How did this happen? I can't explain it, but this is my story. He was entirely unqualified, aside from his amazing experience with Christ and the new life that he now found himself within. And for him, this walk could have been the first time that he's truly alone in we don't know how long. Massive, massive decision time. However, in Mark 7:31, 2 chapters later, we read that Jesus returned to the Decapolis. And there, people brought this deaf man to him and begged him to heal him. And it says that he had to take him away from the crowds before he did it. What does this show us? This guy had done exactly what Jesus told him to. He'd gone back to where he grew up and he'd shared his story. And so this brings us on to the power of stories. Because I've spoken to some people within my role about their stories of meeting Jesus. More traditionally, it's called a testimony. But often people have said things like, oh, yes, it's not very good. Or, okay, but it's not very exciting. I want to say this morning in front of you all, for everyone to hear, that every single story I've ever heard of people meeting Jesus, Christ moving in someone's life, has been genuinely amazing. I utterly love hearing it. So please don't ever think that your story isn't worth telling or isn't incredible. It may not be as night and day as this guy. It may be. I don't know. But it's well worth telling. So please don't ever let yourself believe that it's anything less. So the challenge for us today, some of us may be here and realizing that we've retreated to our caves. We've had this Jesus encounter and we've set out to share our story. We went out to live this new life that we've been given and gifted. But we found out it's painful and it's tough. And for some of us, we may be thinking at a minute that it's just too tough. We aren't sure about continuing with it. Why don't we just go back to the cave? We know what it's going to be. Why not take that easier road? And for some of us, we may feel like that freed man on that walk. We don't understand enough about Christianity. We don't know enough about theology or the theology of Christ or whatever. It may be that all we need to do is talk about how Jesus has moved. We may feel unqualified to talk about him and his impact in our lives because we don't even understand it ourselves thoroughly. So if the worship team can come back up, then I just want to pray again before we sing. And then as we sing, worship to God. Let's just bring our situation, whatever it is, to him and let him minister to us. Let's think about where we might be within this whole story. Because it may be that you feel like the people running to Jesus to see what's gone on, just thinking, I don't understand this, I can't deal with it, and reject him. He doesn't force anything. But there's an opportunity for us today just to reassess where we are and just think about what we're doing. So as we sing, let's just open our hearts up to the Lord.